Woo boy, it's been an exciting few months for Nintendo fans as we endlessly speculate about the Switch while enterprising internet goers dredge up an endless slew of fake reports and impossible rumors. All this while we wait for the info blowout promised to us in mid-January, then of course the actual launch in March. I already talked about how I think the Switch could be a massive success and represent Nintendo's future. Click on the little card up there if you haven't seen it. But there's an emphasis on that could. Thing is, it's by no means a sure thing, and Nintendo's got to do a lot of stuff right to make the system work. And I mean a lot of stuff. At the risk of sounding overly pessimistic, imagine the Switch as a big machine full of gears and stuff, and there's like 1,000 wrenches being thrown at it from every direction, and Nintendo's gotta stop all of them. Impossible? No. Very difficult, even improbable? Yes, and maybe. So let's talk about what they need to get right for the Switch to go down as a great, successful Nintendo platform, and not a Mario playing paperweight. Let's start with the thing that popped up first in just about everyone's mind when they first watched the reveal trailer. That battery. When you're dealing with graphics that good on a device that small, you have to wonder just how far that thing will be able to go on a charge. The awful battery on the gamepad was one thing, but now we're talking about a device that's designed to be taken on the go. I'm sure Nintendo will provide all sorts of charging options, but if the Switch's battery can only last 2 hours, its mobile functionality will be dramatically impacted, thus rendering the entire concept kinda pointless. Then power is a huge factor, followed by cost, and these three things all tie together. The system needs to be powerful enough to run big, exciting games if it's going to attract a big audience away from just gaming on their smartphones and 3DSs on the go, and their PlayStations and their Xboxes and their personal computationizing devices at home. We know it'll run Breath of the Wild, and they were teasing Skyrim, even if that's not technically a confirmed title, though we don't know what kinds of sacrifices to frame rate or resolution or whatever they might have to make. But let's assume for a moment that the power is there. As many people like to point out, there are plenty of tablets and phones out there with beefy chips that can run all sorts of bonkers stuff. But tell me, how much do those things usually cost? Because being affordable is key to the Switch's success. Nintendo already made the mistake of thinking people would instantly shell out $350 for a system just because it had Nintendo and Wii on the box. The Switch is in a much better place than the Wii U was because hype for it has already vastly outshadowed that for its poor predecessor, but as they learned with the 3DS even before that, hype will only take you so far when the price point isn't right. I don't know what the exact magic price for the Switch would be, but if you can go get a PS4 with a game for $300, a handheld for much more than that is going to be a hard sell. Especially considering handhelds are generally personal devices and also have a much higher risk of being damaged on the go. Will parents want to buy each kid their own Switch? Will the price make people too scared to cart it around? Simply, will it be worth the price if a traditional, powerful home console costs just as much? All things Nintendo needs to consider when making the final call. But let's say for a second that Nintendo is magically able to give us heavy power for a super competitive price. Then how long do you think the battery could possibly last? And without a good battery, what's the purpose of making it a handheld? It seems like an impossible problem to me. It's like the Switch nut. Philosophers have been pondering it for thousands of years. It's like one of those pick two things. I don't know how Nintendo will untie this knot, but suffice it to say, they just gotta. Those three things are already enough to make me nervous, but there's a lot more Nintendo needs to get right. Now, there have been a good few consoles over the years that had lukewarm launches yet eventually achieved success, but I don't think Nintendo's in a position for that to happen right now. I'm of the opinion that for the Switch to work out, it needs to have a very strong launch. A good launch is what attracts developers to a system. It's what sets the tone in the eyes of the public. I always hate bringing it up, but the Wii U brought Nintendo's public opinion down further than it's ever been. Are they a garbage company with no hope? Absolutely not. They've made some great games this generation. But they've also made tons of mistakes, and more than ever, they're just not impressing people. This has got to change. The Switch has got to blast out of the gate with guns blazing. The way I see it, there are a few things they need at launch. As I said in my other video, a large part of the Switch's value proposition is the Virtual Console. Nintendo has this habit of releasing legacy games at a slow trickle throughout the generation. This ain't gonna fly this time. I know this stuff takes time and they probably can't port everything over all at once, but there's no reason they can't at least have the big hitters ready for launch. I should be able to pull that thing out of the box and instantly grab my Marios and my Zeldas and all that from NES to N64. I think they should do a lot more with the Virtual Console. GameCube. But if we're just talking about what they need, this is it. Nintendo's all about nostalgia, so they need to grab that old crowd early. Secondly, we all know how Nintendo's going to be bringing some of the Wii U's best games to the Switch, but again, I firmly believe that having a few of them ready at launch is of utmost importance. These ports offer a golden opportunity for Nintendo. For people who didn't buy the Wii U, the people Nintendo is really trying to win back, basically everyone in the world, these are new games. As the years go by, it's more difficult all the time for companies to launch their systems with great games. But this time around, Nintendo barely has to try. We can't have a situation where these games are dripping in real slow, Breath of the Wild way after launch, closer to Christmas, maybe one other port next year sometime. At the very least, they need Zelda and either Splatoon or Mario Kart, preferably both. Can you imagine a launch lineup like that? They seriously can't miss that opportunity. And I know this probably sounds crazy, but if they do this, if they focus on getting that virtual console packed with games and getting 2 or 3 big Wii U games ported over, I don't think they'd need to do much else. They could base 95% of the launch on old games and it would still go great. But the fact that they'll definitely have at least 1 or 2 original titles, well, you can see why this is something they need to jump on. If on day one the Switch has got nothing more than a minigame collection, a copy-paste 2D Mario, and a half-baked Ubisoft title, the hype and momentum will fizzle, and there's no knowing how that will affect its long-term success. All this has been about the console's beginnings, but there's tons of stuff that can go wrong after it comes out too. A lot of it has to do with Nintendo's own mindset about the system. Their vision for it needs to be in the right place. One of my main points in the other video was that Nintendo putting all its efforts into one platform and permanently removing the line between home console and handheld would be genius. So what could go wrong in this scenario? Well, they could not do it. If they themselves view the Switch as a handheld that just happens to hook to the TV, or as a home console that you can just happen to take on the go, and in 2 or 3 years we also get a 4DS or a Wii 3 or whatever, we're gonna be in the same boat all over again. They'll struggle to make enough games for both, whichever one has Pokemon will sell decently, and third parties just won't give a hoot. There are lots of other platforms with lots of other games out there, and Nintendo needs to realize that the market is much better suited for one Nintendo system to play all the Nintendo games. Next up is marketing, which obviously was a huge issue for Wii U. I mean, I could make an entire video on the marketing fiasco that was the Wii U. Most people will tell you that the biggest problem was that it looked like an add-on to the Wii and all that, but here's my thing. Don't you think the people who thought that would still want to play all those new games? Because an add-on is cheaper than a whole new system, and they still weren't interested. They still didn't want the product. No, that was certainly an issue, but I think an equally big, if not bigger problem, was all the cutesy commercials marketing to kids.
Woshi! It's a double Yoshi explosion!
They tried so hard to go after the kids, not realizing that most kids just aren't into Nintendo. They got their crafty minds and their Call of Duties and of course their mobile games. Sure, plenty of kids still like Nintendo, but there's so much competition and Nintendo means nothing to them all by itself. It's just another company. They have absolutely no loyalty for Mario. You know who Nintendo consoles really appeal to? Right here. The folks who've spent the better part of their lives playing Nintendo games, who love Nintendo with a passion, and most importantly, who have disposable income. The Switch can't just cater to kids. Kids are fickle and insecure. Just look at what kids are playing and you'll see that making those cutesy commercials actually makes it less likely that a kid will pick up your game. And they can't keep trying to get the old people either because the casual ship has sailed. No, the 20 and 30-somethings are who they need to go for. The Switch has to satisfy these people first and foremost. Games can still be colorful and family-friendly and all that. That's Nintendo's thing, and we love it. But landing all the little tykes in the world can't be the goal. The Switch's teaser was absolutely perfect in this regard, but they just need to keep it up. They always have to remember who their primary market is. There's one more thing Nintendo needs to do to make the Switch a smash hit, and it's the most important one of all. We can potentially handle a mediocre launch, or a disappointing virtual console, or a weak system, or a crummy battery, or an uncomfortably high price, as long as it's got awesome games. But I mean awesome games. The kinds of games Nintendo used to put out constantly. Not a simplified 3D Mario that's about as deep as a puddle. Not an endless string of side-scrollers and budget games. Not bizarre sequels and spin-offs that quite literally make more people sad than happy. Is there a place for simple fun in this world? Absolutely. But we also want depth. We want stimulating, engaging experiences. We want more this, less this. Some of this, totally, it's great. But more this. The creative stuff that takes us by surprise? Yes, please! As long as it doesn't take tremendous amounts of resources away from the normal stuff, and as long as it takes our own tastes and desires into account at least one single, tiny iota. The Switch positively needs to handle Nintendo's IPs correctly, and that includes giving love to ones that have fallen by the wayside. Innovation is great, it's necessary, but doing something new can't mean abandoning the old and flying in the face of the wants of the majority. The Switch needs to strike a balance. It needs bigger, better games that only improve upon series' foundations. The Wii U was just good. It had tons of games that were good. But the Switch needs to be great. Great like running around Peach's castle for the first time. Great like climbing Death Mountain. Great like gazing over Phendrana Drifts or taking down the Titan Dweevil or any of this. This! So much this! To say that Nintendo's got their work cut out for them would be an understatement. At times it seems unlikely that they can pull all of this off, maybe even impossible. But if you ask me if I think it can happen, I say yes. Because all this is nothing Nintendo hasn't done before or that they don't have the resources to do. If the easy sales of the Wii made them soft, the Wii U toughened them back up again. And if they put their minds to it, the Switch could pull Nintendo back into the limelight. Now if you'll excuse me, let's see, Switch event January 12th. Yep, I'll be in my waiting chair. This thing is filthy. Inside really did a number on it. This video was brought to you by my top patrons and particularly beautiful people, Zoag, Zunjo, Zakanuva, Dr. Roskotnik, Seth Reish, Gavin Fiesel, Heroic Teddy, Shadow Minion, Burgle, Ben, Stealth Dad and his son Caden, hey Caden, Jeremy Sider, and Fruit Jackal. Remember, you can get behind-the-scenes info on projects I'm working on and help me run the channel to boot for as little as $1 a month. See ya!